So my name is Azra. I'll be moderating the panel today. I'm an innovation manager at Fashion for Good, and I manage our scaling materials activities, which means that we work on figuring out solutions for scaling next-gen materials, and one of the key focus areas in that topic is, of course, textile recycling. And as part of that, a big focus area for us is also textile waste, and how can we figure out solutions to make post-consumer textile waste, specifically a viable feedstock for textile recycling. So that's really what today's conversation is going to be about. How can we make this post-consumer feedstock, which is super complex, actually go into textile recycling and make that a viable setup? So today we're going to try to demystify that topic a little bit and also talk about some of the solutions that we are together working on through the project Feedstock Activation Europe, which is also the title of the panel, and I'll be explaining a little bit more about the project in a little bit. But before that, I'm really happy to introduce our speakers. And what's really great is that this lineup of speakers represents actually all of the most critical parts of the value chain for this topic in specific. So let me start. On my left, we have Drishti, Senior Manager for Sustainability Direction, specifically leading the topic of circularity at Adidas. So Drishti has been a driving force in this kind of work, so enabling circular systems and textile recycling. For example, with this project Feedstock Activation Europe, as well as with Project T-Rex, which is in lots of ways the precursor for this work that we're doing together. Next, we have Pontus. Pontus is Head of Feedstock and Supply Chain at Circulose, and he is part of the management team. So I'm pretty sure everybody is well aware that Circulose is one of the first, or if not the first, textile chemical recycler that's operating at real commercial scale in Europe. And Pontus's job is to ensure that there is material and feedstock to work with, which we will see today is not always the most straightforward thing to do. Then we have Tjaco. Tjaco is Country General Manager at the European Recycling Platform, which is part of Landbell Group. European Recycling Platform is one of the Dutch PROs for textiles. Tjaco has been there establishing the Dutch PRO since 2024, but before that has around 12 years of experience from establishing circular systems in plastic packaging, so really bringing that systems perspective from another industry. And lastly, we have Mariska. Mariska is co-owner and currently corporate communications executive at the Boer Group. For those who don't know, Boer Group is one of the largest sorters in Europe, and Mariska has been there for around 25 years. And she also is the president and co-founder of Euric Textiles, and she also chairs the Dutch National Textile Recycling Trade Association. So I believe she's probably one of the most well-connected people in textile sorting in Europe. For the beginning, I'd like to ask a question, the same question to all of the four of our speakers, to really, from your perspective, where you sit in the value chain, if we talk about the problem of channeling post-consumer feedstock into textile recycling, and what the challenge is about that, can you speak more as to, from your perspective, what's the biggest problem? So maybe Mariska, we can start from you.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Azra. Yeah, the biggest challenge, that's also a question where to start then, because there's quite a few challenges if we look at the process from perspective of a collector and sorter. First of all, I think it's also important to explain that every sorting step for a sorter needs to translate in an added value or extra revenue. So, and we should also distinguish probably the sorting process for reuse to that for recycling, because they're two completely different animals. So let me just focus now on the sorting for recycling. Of course, if you take, I always take the example of a winter coat. It's the best example, actually. So you start with a winter coat that has been discarded by the consumer. It lands at a sorting plant, and it is also decided that it's not rewearable anymore, so we're going to do it for recycling. So then the sorter subsequently has to take a number of steps. So first of all, wearable, not rewearable, so not rewearable. But then the winter coat needs dismantling. It needs taking off all the buttons and zippers. And then we will find that the lining inside is often of a totally different material than the outside or the inside of that jacket. So all of that needs to be taken apart before actually the sorting on fiber level can take place. So all these steps, they cost money, obviously, and we are also, we have automated quite a bit of that, especially when it comes to the fiber level sorting. But the problem is that it doesn't really translate in a higher revenue. So for us, if we get a more pure output in terms of the fibers, which are then requested by the recycler, it doesn't mean that those fibers have then a higher sales price, to really make it simple. And that's the problem, because we do have to take all these steps, which cost money, and we don't see that return on investment, let's put it that way. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for the sorters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people take at face value sometimes that waste should be free and there's no cost incurred in the process, but that's a really good example.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Tjaco, what about from your perspective, trying to really establish these producer responsibility organization in textiles?
Well, the challenge specifically for textile-to-textile recycling is it's a value chain, you could say, within other value chains that is competing with virgin, it's competing with attention from brands. Even if a brand's working on sustainability, textile-to-textile is just one of the solutions. And from the other angle, if you look at competition, what Mariska is saying, every garment needs to go somewhere, and sometimes there are other alternatives that are more interesting to send that garment to, economically, usually, than to textile recycling. I think it's mainly an economical challenge.
Yeah.
The technology's there. What we need to do, to go to the solution perhaps, if that's okay,
Yeah, of course.
is to connect all the parties in the value chain and to realize that we then, as a group, are competing with the other value chains and need to be transparent. And actually, we're working with the Boer group, and a colleague of Mariska shared how that's been done. They're just open book calculations, and you just share with each other, I'm going to earn this, I'm going to earn that, and then we make it happen. And it's something that we just need to do first. Set up sort of small partnerships, well, small, hopefully bigger and bigger, and then at some point scale, because I'm sure that my neighbor here wants scale, and that's exactly so a bit about European Recycling Platform. What our vision is to have PROs in the whole of Europe that can then coordinate, collect material, and reach scale for certain specific specifications to cater to and help mechanical recyclers, chemical recyclers.
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Pontus, from your side as a feedstock buyer?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm next in line, and our aim is to use post-consumer waste as our main feedstock. I mean, that's clearly the purpose. But what we see today is, with the system in place, it's not a supply of the high volume, sorted, predictable feedstock available at the quality and or cost as we are currently targeting to be able to meet our specification towards our customers and the brands eventually. Happy to develop more about those thoughts and about the challenges we have around that. But that's basically the situation we are in right now. But again, our aim is to use post-consumer waste as our main feedstock, which means that we will be part of supporting that, and we're sure that there will be a transition, one way or another, to establish this point of quality and price available. But that is very much related to what happened downstream and upstream from us.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think we'll go a little bit deeper onto that perspective. And Drishti, from your side?
I think from my observation, what's been happening is that every time we think we have a problem, we fix it, and then we realize there's a new problem. Like in the past, the problem statement was, oh, sorting is very inefficient, it needs to be automized. So automated technologies came through and sorting became much more efficient. But then through T-Rex, the project mentioned before, we realized that actually the bigger bottleneck is pre-processing to prepare the feedstock for the recyclers to be able to recycle it. And so that is the current problem statement that we're trying to find solutions for. So it feels like each time we solve one part of the value chain, another part of the value chain ends up being another hurdle or another barrier. And I think this is where, to what you said, we need to solve the value chain simultaneously and collectively together. Because I think the downstream value chain for the textiles industry is just non-existent. It's new. It needs building up. And I think this is it sounds really big because it's basically saying the whole value chain is the problem, but it really is that we need to create it in order for it to start working for the industry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing such a breadth of perspectives. I think that also illustrates the problem really well. Pontus, I want to go a little bit deeper into the perspective of you as a feedstock buyer. So if we think about post-consumer waste, I think what's not always straightforward is why is that more complicated to recycle, and why is that more difficult for recyclers to work with compared to, let's say, post-industrial? So if you can maybe paint that picture a bit.
Of course. But maybe to start with, I'm not sure if everyone aware, but as said, we have a factory available with a capacity of 60,000 tons per year and a permit to build out 120,000 tons. So we actually have a factory in place. It was launched 3 years ago under Renewcell, and they developed products that are actually in the market now. There is Circulose fiber. This is Circulose fiber. It works. So that is something that's really good. But we are now, after the bankruptcy, about to restart the production. And we are taking in discarded textiles and making this pulp, which are then turned into a fiber of our partner, the fiber producers, replacing the virgin pulp that they're using otherwise. And then, of course, it goes down to the yarn spinners and the dyers and the weavers, and yes, all the way down the value chain. And it's something I'm thankful for now in my role when I came into this new company 1.5 years ago is firstly all the hard work already done by Renewcell. I mean, we should really see that they built this factory, they got a product out, and they built so much knowledge and experience. So I start with like a recipe. I know that this is what it went with using post-consumer, this is how it went when you use this kind of post-industrial waste, etc. So that is one thing I'm very grateful for. And secondly, all the partners in the value chain, that we actually have brands now, we have the textile value chain, we have the suppliers, they're ready to come back and work with us. And with that said, I think we have a bit of an obligation to succeed this time. And what does succeed mean? That means that we need scale. This is a scale game, because the more scale we get, then we actually have an impact, and by scale we can drive down the prices, and that's essentially what we need to create more demand. And one very essential thing to reach both price and scale would be quality. So now when we are to restart a factory, like, quality is so important for us, because what we see is that the quality we provide will have an impact on how much extra cost and effort that will come downstream. Firstly from the fiber producers to create a very good fiber, and then downstream. So the quality is very important. Does that mean that we should not use post-consumer waste? No, it does not. It's more about the timing. And what's available right now is quite a lot of post-industrial waste, which means that a lot of what comes from the cutting tables today are to a large degree still being incinerated or landfill or downcycled. So we have access to very homogeneous feedstock of high quality that is at a good price. And if this can help us allow to restart the factory and build this quality and learn and develop, that will be the stepping stone we need to succeed to then also be able to invest in our capabilities better on taking on the post-consumer waste. So yes, we can use post-consumer waste already today. We've done it before, but it's about us developing our capabilities and trust in the value chain to then also be better at supporting the post-consumer waste. Because as said, everything there when it comes to bleaching, when it comes to separating, when it comes to cotton content and removing other kind of polyester and elastane or whatever it might be, it's more work. And the focus now to be able to buy any feedstock in the future is to succeed initially, so we then can switch over to post-consumer. And I guess this time is also what's needed to help building this like infrastructure to really scale up the capabilities. So that's a bit how I see it. It's not binary, one or the other. It's about us together with the rest of the value chain developing the skills to be able to get there.
Great. Thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah, can I just respond to what you said? I think because the question was also why is it so difficult to actually recycle post-consumer waste in the end? And you talk about quality, obviously, and about the need to scale up, which is two very important elements. But I think what's often overlooked is where you start with when you talk about post-consumer waste. I mean, we start with, if we take a bag out of the collection bin and we open the bag and we wish it was all textiles and nice garments, but it's not. And many people don't realize that there's such a great diversity in those very bags, post-consumer textile waste that you start with, that already that is creating a cost, basically, because you have to take out everything that is even not textiles. I mean, consumers, they throw away anything they find in their wardrobe and they think, okay, that looks like it can go in a textile bin. So this is something that we have to deal with already as a sorter in the very beginning. So that is something, and additionally also to scale up we need volumes. And I think we should also realize, if we look at the Netherlands, where we are also active, and they're doing quite well, but they have 48% separate collection. So the textile, that still means that more than half is in residual waste. So if you as a recycler need your volumes, we need to create awareness, and we need to make the consumer aware, because they're already making the first selection. They're doing the first part of the sorting, saying this can go in the residual waste, this can go in the textile bin. And there's a huge volume that is still going in residual waste, which could potentially, if kept out of it at an early stage and not contaminated, could be useful for recycling. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to share just very briefly the context of the project that brings us here together. So the project that we're working on together is called Feedstock Activation Europe, or Project FEI, and together with these stakeholders and over 50 other stakeholders across the European textile recycling system, we are designing a blueprint for what we call large-scale feedstock hubs across Europe. So what we mean by that is really large-scale sorting and pre-processing hubs that are automated and are able to deliver feedstock at specification, at the right quality for the recyclers, and do it at a large enough volume to make it also hopefully economical for everybody that's part of this value chain. And just very briefly, why we believe this is the right solution to work on. So firstly, through our research, it's become clear that scale is really the only path to economical feedstock. This kind of business, so sorting for recycling, it requires a lot of capital investment into sorting and pre-processing, and that really means that you need high volumes and high utilization to bring down the cost of the product. Secondly, this kind of hub would have the ability to turn all of this really chaotic waste stream into something that the recycler can actually consider as feedstock, and that is there at specification. So yeah, what the recyclers want, they want feedstock rather than waste, so it's something that at scale we need to be able to provide. And third, in the system that we have today, which is really largely a system focused on sorting for resale, non-rewearables are currently a burden in this system. And how we believe we need to turn it around, we need to create a dedicated system for sorting for recycling, where that non-rewearable waste is actually considered as an asset rather than a burden. So this is the context on the project. If anyone is interested, please feel free to reach out. Now I'd like to go further into discussing this a little bit more. I think it's going to go on its own. A little bit more this as a solution, but also any other solution that is important here. So Mariska, again, a question to you. When it comes to this as a solution, so thinking about these large-scale hubs that are able to really optimize the inflow and the outflow of waste at an automated way, what do you think about the viability of that?
Well, first of all, this is an idea that is not entirely new, to be honest,
No.
because in 22 there was already the Re-Ups initiative, and they launched this idea. And from my perspective, and it still hasn't taken off, so
Yeah.
that is saying something,
Yeah.
to be honest. But from my perspective, it can only work if you have all the industry partners in the textile value chain together, and you can create win-win situations for all of them. And that also means, it doesn't mean only us. Yes, we are part of it, but you also need the spinners, the weavers, the manufacturers. You need everyone there at the table. And I think because we were also part of the Re-Ups initiative, and we were missing the spinners, and it's just really relevant, because as a recycler, you need to sell to a spinner, right? You need to have an agreement with him on your sales price. So I think that is really important. Scaling makes sense, because it's a volume industry. I mean, as far as it is an industry already, but in the future it needs to have these volumes, so you need to scale. And lastly, I think I need to point out that we should not overlook the importance of reuse in this whole management of textile waste, let's put it that way. Because sorting for reuse, selling second-hand markets, that has always been actually a good business, been able to financially sustain itself. This has changed over the last 3 years, so it's very, very difficult now. But we should not then simply say, okay, then we're going to recycle everything. Because in in truth, if you take a full garment and you look at the value of a full garment, which has also had its carbon footprint when it was originally produced, you cannot compare that value to a secondary raw material. So it's really important from economic perspective, ecological and social perspective, that we try and keep those garments in the lifespan for as long as possible. Of course, we need to recycle, because that is the key to circularity. So we have to find solutions there, but one needs to sort of follow the other and not come in place of the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I fully agree, because I think oftentimes when we're talking about recycling, we forget that the first pillar of circularity is reuse, right?
Sure.
In the waste hierarchy as well, recycle comes below reuse. So we should only be recycling what really cannot be reused anymore. And then textile to textile recycling should be the highest level in the recycling bucket, because it allows us to close the loop and reduces dependencies on virgin materials. But I think what you just said is so important. We have to maximize the reuse umbrella still.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So one question that I want to ask you, Drishti, but then also Tjaco, if you want to react to that as well. When we are working on this project FAY, we are looking at what makes the viability of such a hub, and something that's definitely a key part of it is also considering not just textile to textile recycling solutions, but also open loop solutions or downcycling solutions. And there's a little bit of, conflict sometimes in the industry around that. So my question is, do you consider that to be also kind of pragmatic stepping stone that we need, or do you consider that to be something that derails our circularity progress and agenda?
I think that's a really great question, because it often comes up, and I think open loop recycling is a very key piece of the puzzle that is required. I think we need all the solutions that can help valorize the waste as much as possible in whatever means that is. Of course, we want to close the loop as much as possible, so we want to maximize textile to textile, but if it's not fully possible, that is okay. It's okay to still have open loop recycling where feedstock from other industries is coming in for the textile use, or our waste is going to another industry for use. I think the ultimate goal that we should try to rather focus on is to move up within the waste hierarchy, so to avoid the disposal recovery actions, and then maximize the recycling bucket as much as possible with all the solutions available within that range.
I think within the industry we're really at a point that we're a bit expanding our mindset in terms of that, and really considering all of these different loops that textiles and all of the other materials can go into. What about Tjaco, from your perspective? Netherlands is one of the countries that does have some national targets in place. There are targets, right, for recycling in specific, but it's not just the textile recycling target, right?
Yes, the targets in the Netherlands, there are 4 different types of goals that you can reach. So reuse in the Netherlands, very local, reuse abroad, which can be anywhere in the world. And then there's a total percentage that you need to do of reuse and recycling, and a minimum of reuse. And all the recycling that you do, you need to do this year 27% fiber to fiber of the total recycling. So there's a lot of moving panels in that target setting already, but you're motivated to reach more reuse in line with what Drishti said by the legislator. And as a PRO, we're trying to figure out how to then motivate and incentivize the stakeholders in the value chain to actually also follow that approach. And the textile to textile is a challenging target though, so it's, I think I see you smiling. It's something that a lot of people have been working on for a long time. It seems to be kind of flatlining. There's no real growth yet. There are some really promising initiatives, and we're also looking for more initiatives. And frankly, maybe just to go into this other topic and also react to the hubs idea. We always have to be very conscious of the whole value chain. And yes, in Europe we can do, the collection is a no-brainer. You need to do it where the material is discarded. sorting is a question. Where do you do the sorting? I'd say in Europe, please. Then the recycling, though, the fiberization or whatever type of recycling you are going to do, I don't know, maybe you can reach scale for a certain specific type of material by having a plant somewhere, but not necessarily in Europe. Because at some point, you're going to go to a spinner, and a fabric maker, a weaver, or those are probably not in Europe. And for now, we really have to accept that. And so that means your geographic scope is always going to be the global.
Yeah.
So that the hubs.
We hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. When it comes to these hubs, Pontus, I want to also ask for your reflection. Let's say hypothetically, these kinds of large-scale hubs would exist. They would be really focused on producing feedstock for the recycler. Can you tell us a little bit about how that would change the situation for you, operationally, and how that would impact positively, hopefully, your feedstock sourcing?
I mean, scale is very important for us. I mean, we're talking about a capacity of 120,000 tons per year here eventually when we debottleneck our factory. So there's a lot of containers we need. And I sometimes now get questions, someone coming saying that I have 5 tons of post-consumer waste, can you buy it? And it's like, we ship in containers per day, not in 5 tons per year. So scale is very essential to be able to validate this source and all that. Does it require it to be 100,000 or 20,000 tons per hub? I don't know, I haven't done the math. I know that for our business, it's much better to have one plant of 100,000 capacity than 5 of 20. But from a buying perspective, like what's the critical scale? If there's like standardized way of sorting and that comes from 5 different locations or 1 different location, it doesn't matter too much for us as a buyer. I think what is more important there when I think about the ecosystem as such is to make sure that we take care of all the waste generated. And this is something where I try to take responsibility as a buyer to always find the waste of the waste. Because of course, if I talk to my production manager, he said that buy that 100% cotton white and it would be very easy to be processed, right? But I can't afford that feedstock, it's too expensive. But the thing is that of course, like reuse is first, and if we have this 100% cotton white, it should go to mechanical recycling. We can create good fiber without too much processing chemically, etc. What we try to do is to get that harder to recycle with like colors that need bleaching and some polyester and elastane that we can separate out in our process. But it's very important, of course, also that not only we succeeding, but all the peers here in the recycling. So we need someone to take care of the polyester and the polycotton and all the other materials. Because in the end of the day, I think the only way for us to reach a price level that we are targeting will be for others to pitch in with the revenue. And if the sorting is good on reuse and the white, and then cotton reaches us, but the rest have to go to incineration or becomes a cost, then, I mean, that total cost have to be carried by those paying for the feedstock. So I think it's really about ensuring that the whole pie have to be distributed around different solutions.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. I think that really helps to paint the picture on the scale of the effort that we need, actually. So I want to move on. I think we talked a little bit about the solution, and of course it's not a perfect solution, and there's various things that we need to still figure out. But I think we really, help to paint the picture on, how complex this problem actually is. When we talk about how can we get there, Tjaco, I have a question for you. We've talked a little bit about what this infrastructure needs to look like, with these hubs systems. But what is your perspective if we talk about something like such hubs? Who actually needs to be in the room and committed to make that happen? But also, what is potentially the role that a PRO can play?
Yeah, so the PRO is maybe a good one to invite. Yeah. And then others, we need all the stakeholders. We need the whole value chain there. And maybe even to Mariska's point, maybe even the collection, although maybe you could start with the sorter. But then you have to go all the way to the weaver or the fabric maker at least. And that's quite a long value chain, and as I said, could be geographically widespread, and maybe the sorting and the recycling or the preparation for recycling is in the hub. But yeah, and you need all those parties at the table. And sometimes you may have, like you can convene with multiple competitors on one area, multiple spinners, but often you would have like just a consortium that is just one one chain, so to speak. I think that's how we're going to be going forward. And the brands, I didn't mention them yet, but yes, that's like the
Also
end.
important.
Kind of. Yeah, so let's not forget. It's sort of, but for brands, I can imagine it's not super easy to be on board, but maybe that's something Drishti can answer better than I can.
That's a great segue into my next question, which is for Drishti, actually. Drishti, Adidas has been actually a key instigator in this work, in the work that we did with T-Rex, Textile Recycling Excellence, which was a major EU Horizon project that we wrapped last year. And in general, really active in this kind of orchestrating circular systems type of work. But it's very, very, very upstream compared to where Adidas actually sits. So I want to ask, besides all the initiatives that you of course do on the demand side, why does it make sense for Adidas to be so active on this side? And what do you think that the role of brands in general should be in enabling these systems?
Yeah, I think the brands are indeed key to this, which is why we participate. I think looking back with Adidas's history on this topic, we have been part of the Sorting for Circularity series that was also led by Fashion for Good, which was really about diagnosing the problem. First, understanding what exactly does the landscape of post-consumer textile waste look like. With that, then we were inspired and we led the T-Rex project that completed last year. And that was really focused on if a blueprint could be created for textile-to-textile recycling in Europe, what could that look like? Not just from a policy perspective, but also a technical and economic perspective. And with putting all these puzzle pieces together, we keep realizing that there's still more work to do. And so I think our view as the brand is that it's our responsibility to help convene the value chain together. We sort of feel like we're the bridge between the upstream, the manufacturing of the garment, and then the downstream once the garments get disposed of by consumers. And I think this is where we have a very unique perspective to be able to work with both sides of this value chain to eventually one day close them together and bring them together, right? So I think this is why we do want to have first-hand experience in being part of the conversations, of the problems and solutions in this downstream puzzle piece, though we might not have so much to do directly, but at least being part of the discussions, helping to brainstorm solutions, and ideally also then taking them into our upstream and into our own operations can help one day create the circular loop that I think we all are trying to work towards.
Great, and I think also from our perspective as we're working on this project, one thing that from Adidas perspective and also the other brands that are involved is really helpful to get a little bit of a pulse on policy. And I think policy is a really hot topic at the moment. Of course, EPR is coming, and that's really great. It gives a lot of hope that there is a kind of a bright future for this system, hopefully. But as we know, there are a lot of challenges. The systems aren't harmonized, and it's a big question mark when they will be harmonized. Of course, what is actually the timeline until we have an EPR system that is well functioning and can actually support the industry? So here, Tjaco, I want to ask you first, but also please anybody who has a reaction to this really hot topic, please add to it. The question is, does the policy direction where we are headed to at the moment, does it actually support solutions like this, specifically if we talk about EPR?
I may start with the Netherlands because I'm most familiar with that, and it's operational, you could say. And on textile to textile, interestingly, the target isn't very specific. It's not specific on where you're actually measuring this textile to textile. So I'm asking the regulator in emails and then all the face-to-face meetings that I have, can you please have a more specific target for textile to textile recycling? And if you actually want to reach textile to textile, you probably want to have it a bit further back in the value chain, because pulling material is often better than pushing it somewhere, and that's what EPR has been doing in the past quite a bit. It's pushing material like helping the collector to bring it somewhere, but then it's there, and then it's the sorter, bring it somewhere, and it's there. So yeah, I think you get the point. It's all about pulling the material back into the economy. That's what it's all about.
So if I understand well, EPR, in order to be successful to support circularity, it really needs to be, at least the targets and the mechanics, they need to be set up in a way to actually have, you know, the lever there to get to the goals that we want. So the targets, the various circularity targets.
Yeah.
So practically, I guess that would mean that we need to have a mechanism to really support, for example, textile recycling directly with funds or other ways.
Yeah. If the targets are really clear and enforced, that also helps, then we'll go for it. And yeah, that's much easier.
And maybe add on to that, because we haven't discussed actually the problem with virgin. As we speak about, you know, setting up systems to make preparing for recycling more efficient, more cost efficient. But in the end, we have a super low virgin price in nearly all the materials to compete with.
Absolutely.
And the role for a PRO in such a hub would be, for me, mainly to bridge, you know, the gap, the financial gap between a recycled fiber or output of a recycling process and a virgin. So, yeah, I think that's also, if we want to really create a viable business case for recycling in the future, we have to address that.
Absolutely.
There's no other way.
And I think the last point I want to add also is, in my perspective, EPR is designed to support a system that ideally exists already. I don't think EPR policies are designed to build and create a system, at the moment at least. So this is where there is almost the underlying assumption that the ecosystem already exists, that the value chain is set up well enough to take the funds and then scale that further. The reality is the value chain does not exist fully across most Europe countries. So this is where there is this gap at the moment that needs filling before EPR schemes actually kick into effect.
Absolutely. Yes?
Drishti isn't a client yet of us, and so maybe she doesn't know that we have a strategy to work on future targets with our clients, some bigger brands, and we come together to talk about textile-to-textile recycling and to make a sort of an extra step, and we have a bit of budget for it, and sometimes the budget isn't even necessary to be that big. It's all because the first steps are about convening, finding out where the barriers are, etc., with the brands, and then set up projects. And we've started just a year ago, so just bear with me, and it's a long-term process. But we definitely are working with the brands and developing rather than just filling the gap. Because I think that if we would just be filling the gap forever, it might become bigger and bigger. And we want it to be as small as possible, realistically, because Mariska's point is super valid. As I said in the beginning, we're competing with all the other value chains, including virgin. So, yeah, but we definitely need to develop it, innovate, and with the brands, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
And having said that, EPR is also not a silver bullet, huh?
No.
I mean, it really isn't. You were talking about creating a pool in the market, which I think is extremely important. But I think a legislation like ESPR with a mandatory recycled content target will create that, hopefully. But yeah, there's a lot to be said about policy. I mean, we also have really high hopes for that. But in the end, designing the right policy is already a challenge. Implementation, and last but not least, enforcement. I mean, that's if we don't have enforcement, real enforcement of the legislation that's coming out of Europe now, then we won't get anywhere. It will just miss impact. So that's what I'm a bit skeptical about.
No, absolutely. I think,
Sorry, last comment also, I think with ESPR, we often treat it like the ambitious bar, but it's not, it's the compliance level, right? It's setting the baseline and the foundation for the industry. And I think we need to always remember that. So it's not indeed a silver bullet that will solve all the problems. It will just somewhat bring the industry on the same level, and then we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think that really helps to explain the tension that we have, and that we also really need to build a system that is functioning without EPR potentially, and where feedstock can be economical, I mean, hopefully also without EPR someday. So we have a few minutes left, and I want to leave time for audience Q&A as well. But before we move on to that, I want to just ask one closing question. It's a bit of a typical question, but I like to ask it anyways. So everybody here represents a different part of the value chain. If there's one thing that you could ask to another stakeholder, another speaker, another group of stakeholders, when it comes to this challenge in specific, post-consumer textile recycling, what would your ask be? Maybe Drishti, you want to start?
That is a very interesting question. I think maybe not a specific player in the value chain, but rather the value chain to continue collaborating and working together and having these open dialogues, because I think the minute that we start putting competitiveness into this landscape, the progress will be prevented or slowed down. I think right now the space is so big that everyone has a room to play within it. So I think really continuing the collaborative spirit and working together is critical to help unlock the progress we need.
Thank you.
Lean in now. I mean, we need the scale to be able to support the rest of the scaling. It's the hen and the egg. We can't sit and wait for the solutions we just talked about. So from the demand side, please lean in now. We have the solutions.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And maybe just, I think we need to realize that there are many value chains that we're building. And it's a sort of a combination of many value chains that need to fit together. And it's a big puzzle. And as a PRO, that's the work that I love most, is to do this puzzling with all the stakeholders. And I think there's one thing maybe that is missing, because this is the start. We're building these small value chains everywhere, and well, small. I mean, 60,000 tons, small value chains. But at some point, we need to have the vision to move to a commodity market where recycled content is a commodity. And I haven't seen the kind of standards that you would expect, specifications, all the things that you need to make transactions very easy in the whole textile space. So actually I think there might be a development point. If I could, I don't know if I could ask who I could ask, I guess. Let's work on this together.
We'll figure it out, yes.
Yeah, start developing those market specifications and to make the transactions easier.
Very practical,
yeah.
Thank you.
I have a very specific ask, and I also know who to. We were talking about the importance of reuse before, how it is also supporting, in the end, recycling. As I also mentioned, it is under a lot of pressure. And one of the main reasons for that is the ultra-fast fashion, the very, very low quality, cheap products that are put on the market. So if I would have one ask, it would actually be to all the existing and all the future PROs, that they, on top of the EPR fee that is being paid by the producers, if they have producers, and we need a clear definition for ultra-fast fashion as well, okay, I need to double ask, sorry. But once that's set, that they just put like a 25% environmental tax on top of the EPR fee, because we need to control this somehow. It is threatening for the reuse industry, it's threatening for the recycling industry. So we need to be a little bit protective of our European borders.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think we don't have that much time left, unfortunately just a couple minutes. I just want to say, before going to the audience Q&A, thank you for bringing such depth of expertise from your individual positions in the value chain. I think it really helped to paint the picture and also give really concrete proposals on how can we solve the problem. So let me just see what questions can we address now. Yeah, I think Mariska, actually, I mean, it's not a question for you, but for the whole group, eliminating ultra-fast fashion would ensure better quality textiles in the value chain, as well as longer readability of an item. Should we not focus on that? So I think that's just a really interesting reflection to what you just said as well. Yeah. Does Europe need... interesting. Does Europe need sectorial sustainability standards for textiles and other sectors? Apologies, I don't really understand this question. Yeah. Open loop textile recycling is estimated to be apparently only 7% of the total textile disposal. What do we need to do to increase it? Do you believe there's anything we can do? Or if we should do?
Are you looking at me? Open loop?
Anyone who has
Anyone who has an idea about that?
Yeah. Well, open loop is indeed something that we shouldn't forget. Drishti mentioned it in the, and I see some nodding here. And yeah, open loop will remain important. And open loop, what is it? Most of the time it means that the fiber is going to another sector. And even if you would use a fiber now to make a carpet or a curtain even, or a rope, we have, in the Netherlands we have lots of carpet makers and rope makers that export globally, and we can't say if we use the fibers in those products that it's fiber to fiber, because the definition says it's got to go back into the garment. Maybe, I don't know, there's some room there, I think. But also, I hear more and more applications for fibers and what to increase the open loop, and I think it's, well, I think it's more than 7%, what we're reporting anyway in Netherlands. But the textile is the most challenging and most fun one to work on, maybe.
Good.
But open loop is also important.
Yeah, but I think open loop requires open-minded thinking. You know, and don't call it downcycling, because as Drishti mentioned very correctly, we need all of those solutions in the end. And oftentimes an open loop solution is more sustainable than a closed one. Because if you think about it, when you put a fiber back into a t-shirt, or you put it back into insulation material or into a car part, that car will probably last longer than the t-shirt. You know, and we're not yet able to recycle again that t-shirt endlessly, which is the ultimate goal. But we have to think about these things, and also volume-wise, you know, there's many materials that are just not suitable for fiber to fiber, so you really need the open loop solutions there as well.
Absolutely. I can see that they're signaling that our time is up, but thank you so much. I think it's really been a really interesting and really concrete discussion. Just a few very briefly takeaways that I want to, you know, highlight from this conversation. I think first, post-consumer and textile recycling is really also one of the key solutions to really close the loop on textiles. I think secondly, it's not as straightforward as it may seem, and it's a challenge that is really complex from multiple perspectives in the value chain. And lastly, we need purpose-built infrastructure, and we need the whole value chain to really rally around these solutions. So thank you so much to all our speakers, and thank you to the audience. That's it.